Today I'll be demonstrating acrylic painting techniques and tricks while I create an abstract painting. As you can see, I have one painting already started. I've created a gradient, meaning a blending from a lighter to a darker shade, tint, or tone of a color. And you can see that I've already taped this down to the board, and since I've already painted on it, I needed to retape it. And so I'll be using this a little bit later. In the meantime, I'll show you how to get started. So first, you'll need your board or something sturdy to attach your painting to. Today, I'll just be painting on a piece of Bristol board, which is a heavy paper, sort of like cardstock. And this is great for simple painting, but you could also paint on nicer things like canvases and panels, or even cardboard. All sorts of different things, but today we'll be using this. And we will be painting down taping down the sides so that our painting remains as flat as possible, okay? If we do not tape it down, our paper might turn into something like this that is very wavy or curly, because once you add the water to the board, it will want to wrap itself up and twist itself up like this. So to prevent that, we're going to tape this down. Now, we're not going to use the tape directly off of the roll. First, I'm going to measure out the tape. I just want it to go past the sides, so you just do a rough measurement, and then you rip it at the end. Now, using your pants or your shirt, whatever you're wearing, you're going to attach the tape to that 2 or 3 times so that you can pick up just a little bit of the lint that's on your clothing. So you can see that I've added a little bit of lint, and so I've made this tape a little less sticky. You have to make the tape a little less sticky because otherwise there's a very good possibility that you're going to rip your paper when you remove the tape later. It's very desirable to have a border around your artwork as well, which will be left when we remove the tape. The tape is going to be masking the edge of the paper, and that's going to leave a nice little white border. And if we were framing this, putting it behind glass, you would use a mat, which is a piece of thick, very thick board, often white, but they make it in every single color, that goes around the painting and covers that little border. So it's very desirable to have that little lip there. And also just a painting that isn't even framed looks very nice with a little border around it. So each of these pieces of tape, I'm just attaching to my pants, my jeans very quickly. I'm trying to make that border nice and straight. And you really want to take your time with this part and make sure it's nice and straight and looks even, because that way your painting will be protected through all the different layers of painting you're going to be doing. So I already showed you one painting that had one layer done, but I want to do a whole lot more layers than that. And when you're doing acrylic paint dries fairly quickly. You can use a hair dryer or a blow dryer to dry it out a little bit faster, but usually that's not even necessary unless you're painting very impasto, which means very thick paint, which is not something we're going to be covering in this demonstration. So my paper is now taped down. The edges are nice and even. The borders are nice and even, rather. And after my first coat of paint and this paper gets a little bit of moisture on it, it might start to get a little wavy. If that happens as it dries, I can always put more tape around it, like I did in my other example, where I've added more tape to hold it down to kind of secure it again to the board. But right now, just one strip of tape is going to be plenty. Okay, so I've got my painting supplies out, and I've got some fun things that I'm going to be trying out over here, and then I've got all the basic supplies that I need over here. So I've got my paint palette. This one's a clean one, but oftentimes they'll have paint on them already. So acrylic paint dries very fast, and you can just put paint right on top of it. It won't mix together or absorb like watercolor would. You're going to need a bucket of water or a cup of water or a jar. You're going to need some paper towel to potentially dry your brush after you rinse it in the water. And you're going to need a variety of brushes for this. So we might explore all of these brushes. I've got flat brushes, which are these types of brushes with the straight or flat end. And I've got a variety of round brushes. So round brushes will make thinner lines. they're round, they have a pointy end, and the flat brushes will make straight lines a little more easily and thicker lines, and round brushes are more for thinner lines. So to start out with, I want to go ahead and demonstrate a few different techniques. Now, one thing that you can do that's fun to do is masking. Now, I'm going to pull out some tape, and I'm not painting with any kind of plan today. I do want to demonstrate a color scheme. So on that other painting that already has the yellow on it, I think I might do some warm colors on that, which would be an analogous color scheme, because those are colors that are next to each other. So warm colors would be orange, red, and yellow, the colors you think of when you think of fire. I've linted up this tape, meaning I've made it a little less sticky by attaching it to my pants or sweater very quickly. And one thing I want to demonstrate is something that you can do, which is masking. Okay, so masking in art is when you cover something and then when you paint over it, the paint will not it will shield the paper or canvas from the paint. So I'm just going to put a couple of tape lines across this. And again, I'm making my tape a little less sticky because I don't want to rip the paper when I remove this tape. And this tape doesn't need to stay there for a long time. And I'm just kind of thinking about this sort of, I don't know, not really a wave pattern, this kind of ray pattern where there's sort of these lines that are radiating out from maybe a point that's off of the picture somewhere. So I'm going to grab a few pieces of tape, and while I'm thinking about this, while I'm adding these, I want to think about what colors maybe I want to work with. Okay, and I don't know, I'm thinking maybe since the other one's warm colors, maybe I could do cool colors for this one. So let's keep it just like that because I just want to demonstrate this pretty quickly. And we're going to be playing with some other fun things that we can paint on and paint with in just a moment. First, we just kind of want to get into the basics. So when you get your palette of paint set up here, and you're not always going to need every color. I have every color right now just because I want to show you what a nice clean paint palette looks like. You only need a few drops of each color. You don't want these wells overflowing. And this is where all the action's going to happen. Now this hole is for folks who like to hold their paints. You know, if you've ever watched someone paint on TV, then like, you know, Bob Ross, for example, you'll see that he actually holds his paint palette and mixes his paints right here. I'm going to just put my paint palette off to the side. And since I said I was going to be using cool colors, I'm going to go ahead and take my brush and I'm going to move some of these pure pigments from the wells on the side to the center, okay? And maybe I'm going to even put a few of them in a couple of different places. So I'm going to move my purple over there, and then I'm going to wash my brush, and that makes my water a little bit more opaque. Your water is fine as long as you can see through it. Once it starts to get so thick or opaque that you can't see through it anymore, then it's probably time to change out your water. So we might have to do that in a little bit. So you sort of just use your brush as a scoop. We don't have enough palette knives probably for everybody to use, or spoons or anything like that. And we'd have to wash them off anyway. So since we're already painting with the brush, you might as well just use the brush, make sure it's clean in between, and then let's go ahead and get some green. So we're going to be doing cool colors. So cool colors are the colors you think of when you think of water. And there's all different types of water in the world: blue water, green water, maybe even purple water. So these are the cooler colors. Okay, and these are the colors I'm going to be using. I certainly might be using some black, so let me just go put some pure black over here. Now black won't get messed up with other colors very easily, but white really will. So you got to be really careful when you're scooping out your white, because it's very easy to stain it or taint it with another color. And you can see that the way I set my palette up is I have the lighter colors, white and yellow, over here on one end, and then the darker colors like black at the other end. But I just did my Roy G. Biv, my rainbow colors. So I went yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, green. You don't have to be quite that organized, but it's generally a good idea to keep your light colors on one end of your palette and your darker colors or values on the other end of your palette, because you want to keep those pretty separate so you can keep your color mixing pretty clean. All right. So first, I just want to show you, so let's go ahead and just start with some blue. I like blue. I have bluish eyes. They're not always the same blue. And you can apply the paint so many different ways with acrylic. Okay, you want to be mindful of your brush strokes, which direction you're going. Okay, you don't want to just go scribble scrabble all sorts of different directions. You'll notice that if you add more water, your color gets lighter or desaturated. So that's the intensity of the color. So right here, the color is fairly intense. It's fairly dark. Down here, it's going to be a little lighter. You can see it goes on a little smoother because I added some water. Okay, now I put that tape down, so I'm going to paint right up to the tape. You might notice along the edges, if I'm painting, like if something goes this way, like the tape edge goes this way, it's hard, you get a little white line sometimes. So you might have to go in there a little bit extra or kind of even push the brush into there. When the line is parallel, so when something is masking or covering the paper or the canvas and it's going along the direction that you're painting, you can see that you don't usually get that little white line there, but let's see if we can recreate that one more time. Let me go ahead and take some of this green. I don't want to mix up the green right over here yet, so let's just wash my brush, put a little green over here, and let's make like a green blue, maybe a teal kind of color over here. Okay, and let's mix a little bit of that in here. And you can see that I'm layering, so I'm using a lot of water, so you can see the blue through the green. Whereas if I use a brush with less water on it, I can cover it a little bit more. And you can see the brush strokes in acrylic paint. So say, for example, I just do very short strokes like this, you can see those brush strokes, okay? Now, again, I don't have anything particularly in mind other than this color palette. I'm just kind of having fun exploring different options. So I was using that green. Let's go ahead and take a little bit more of that blue. And maybe we even want to lighten it. So maybe I'll put a little bit of white over here. Okay, so I can make a tint of blue, or I could mix gray and make a tone. Or I could mix black with the blue and make a shade of blue. I don't know that I'm going to be adding any black to this painting. I think I'm going to keep these colors fairly on the tint side and more of the pure colors, right? And maybe you saw a little bit of that white edge there. I could recreate that one more time. So let's say I paint across here. So you can see how that elevation from the tape to the paper leaves a little white streak right there. And I want to cover that up. So you can either go the different direction, or you can just kind of push the brush in there a little bit more to get that area filled in. And I can also even add just water to the paper, similar to kind of how you do watercolor. And let's get a little bit of purple going in here. And you can see how that makes a very desaturated purple. It's very see-through. Transparent is the way we would describe that in art usually. And so up here I've kind of got some transparent purple going. Let's get a little bit of blue over here into my purple. So we'll get sort of a blue violet. And I'm just sort of using purple and violet interchangeably. They are different colors. I'm not going to be super technical with my color terminology right now, but purple and violet are different. One of them has more blue in it, one of them has more red in it. Okay. Do you know which one is which? Look it up online, see if you can figure it out. There's a lot of contention though. You'll see different answers from different folks, but there is a technical answer, technically correct answer. Let's get a little more purple in here, and since I was talking about doing tints, I might pull over a little bit of white here in just a second. So I'm just going to use the edge of that. So I'm getting some purple over here, but again, I've got that pure white over here, so I'm not too worried about messing this guy up over here. But let's put our purple over here, and now I can go over this and check that out. See, I'm going over that transparent layer, and now it's covering it up a little bit more nicely, and I'm kind of liking that streaking going on. You can also dry your brush, right? Dry it on a paper towel and get sort of more streaky lines, you know? That might be something you like. So there's so many different ways to use the brush depending on what way you hold it, what direction you're going. Let's go ahead and get a little bit darker up here, a little bit more pure pigment. And I'm just going to kind of cover this whole thing and put a nice coat on this and fill up all that white paper with color. Not all of it, maybe. Maybe there'll be a few little streaks, but let's just have fun kind of filling this in real quickly. So again, just be mindful of your direction. If you see little white streaks, you might want to cover those up, especially along the tape edge. And you can do that by going back and forth real quickly, or sort of pushing the brush in those areas and then brushing it out so it's not as obvious what you were doing. Let's get a little more, hey, let's go crazy. Let's get a little bit of that green up here again. All right. And because I'm using those analogous colors, those colors that are near each other, blue, purple, green, generally this is going to look pretty nice no matter how sloppy or messy it gets or abstract it gets, because analogous colors often look very attractive next to each other. I'm liking that. That is looking cool. Okay, so this is probably dry down here already. And so just what I wanted to show you, I'm going to wash my brush real quickly, wipe it on this paper towel, and let's go ahead and check out these tape mats. So let's go ahead and remove these and see what happened underneath there. So when you're removing tape, you want to remove it at a 90-degree angle. So if the tape is going this way, I'm going to go this way. And you should see a nice little triangle that the tape makes as you're pulling it. And I'm going to pull it carefully. And there you go. That's my mask. So it left these white areas where the paper was covered up with tape. And that is a fun thing to try out. So you should try that, or something like that. I'm going to be doing some other techniques as well. So let's go ahead and maybe go back to our warm color. So the tape here in the middle, I'm going to just use my fingernail to pull that tape up. And then again, you want to pull it at a 90-degree angle. Isn't that cool? So that's what the masking does. When you cover something that while you're painting it, it will leave the layer underneath, in this case just the pure white paper, exposed, and then I could paint something else in there. Now let me go ahead and go back to my warm composition here. So with the yellow, all right, and so I wasn't very good with palette management. I covered a lot of this with the cool colors, so I've got a little less space to work with the warm colors. That's okay. It's just a little bit difficult because this is going to stay, this paint is going to stay active or fresh for a little while. So I left myself very little room. I should have definitely been a little bit more conscientious about how I was managing my palette. Okay. Let's go ahead and start trying out some of these fun things we have over here. So for example, in addition to your brush, you have other things that you can paint. So for example, along the idea of masking things, you can actually use different odd materials. Now you're looking at this and you're like, Dr. O, what are you going to do with that piece of glittery ribbon? Well, check this out. If I lay this down, and if it doesn't want to stay flat, I can grab my tape. I'm not going to use the tape for a mask. Again, you got to make the tape a little less sticky, so that's something that people forget. I just want to hold this tape down, and again, I kind of want to do something where it looks like it's going off the edge a little bit, okay? So let me go ahead and tape this down. Now, I didn't need to de-stick it too much because I'm just taping to tape. I'm taping it off the paper, but just as a good habit, I just want you to remember to make your tape a little less sticky so you don't rip off any of the paper, because that's going to make you cry when you get that piece of paper all messed up. Okay, and now I laid this down here. Can you guess what I'm going to do to this? Let's see. So let's go ahead and grab a little bit of orange. And again, just like I was saying, just as a good habit, you want to move at least a little bit, if not all of a good amount of the paint from your well into the middle, because this is where the mixing action is going to happen. And let's just not use the paint out of the bottle. That's like super boring, super basic. So let's not be boring and basic. Let's go ahead and reach in here and maybe go ahead and grab, oh, I don't know. I was thinking about yellow, but let's actually add a little bit of red, because we want to go ahead and get some contrast here. So we want you to be able to see this pretty easily. So let's take a little bit of that red and mix it with the orange, okay? And we'll get a reddish orange right here, okay? So now we've made our own color, right? It's a unique color that we just made. And check this out. So you can paint right on top of that, okay? Now we're gonna use the brush for part of this and see how that works. We're just experimenting with stuff right now. We're just experimenting. This might not work. This might not work, but we're just gonna experiment and see what happens when we go over this with a brush. Okay, so that's one option. We could go over all this with a brush. We don't want the paint to be super wet, because if it's wet, it'll just sort of puddle together on the other side. So let's get a little more red in with our orange. Okay, And it's fun mixing the paint. It is difficult to try and manage it to keep it just in one place. So this side mostly, I did go a little bit over there, but this side mostly is what happens when you go over some kind of material or texture with a paintbrush. And then let's show you another tool. So we do have these sponges that we can use, okay? The sponges are really fun because, for example, I can just pick up a little bit of color, right? And I can just actually dab it on here, and you can see that I get a spongy texture, right? So that's kind of fun just to paint with. And so I'm just gonna put like, oh, I don't know, just a little bit of sponging over here. So you can see that it transfers the texture from the sponge onto my canvas. So that's pretty cool, right? And if I brush it, then I get a different texture than when I just lay it down, right? But let's see what happens when, and again, let's mix a little bit of this red and the orange so we don't just have some basic color. And then let's see what happens if we put the sponge through here, and let's just do an experiment. Let's see what happens. So we're creating an abstract painting, so there isn't really like a right answer. An abstract painting is something that doesn't quite look like anything exactly from real life. But you know, if you were looking at this and you were thinking of a sunset or a sunrise, I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame you for that. So it can remind you of something from real life, but again, it's not supposed to be like a picture, like a photograph of something from real life. Now I'm kind of liking that also. I'm noticing that as I paint over the edge of the ribbon that I laid down, that texture, that it sort of leaves a streak, kind of like the tape mask. So put some of that down. And then let's go ahead and lift this up so we don't, so we can find out what happened with our experiment. So you're going to be doing lots of experiments. Hey, now that's pretty neat. We got this sort of streaky effect. Now, in some places the paint was a little too, there was a little too much paint and it kind of got puddled in some places, but places where there was like a medium amount of paint or maybe even a drier brush, we got some of these really cool sort of crisscrossy patterns. And you know what? I bet if I painted this, so let's say I painted over on top of this paper towel or some other surface, check this out. I bet if I kind of dry out the sponge, now sponges are going to absorb a lot of water, so you're going to have to dry those out extra. You might need another paper towel. But if I just kind of put some paint directly on this ribbon, let's see what happens. Hey, cool. You can kind of use it like a stamp, can't you? Well, that's kind of neat too. Now your hands are going to get real messy, so in that case, you would be very wise to be wearing an apron. So you can see my apron right here. I'll lift it up over the painting. So an apron is really a fantastic idea because then you always have somewhere to wipe your fingers and you have something that's going to protect your clothes. So a real painter is going to wear an apron. I've also got other things that I can paint over here. Check this out. So for example, I can paint with something like a cotton ball. So again, if I want to move just a little bit of my paint to the middle, let's go ahead and just put some yellow over here next to the orange and then wash out our brush. Now my water's getting pretty opaque, so I should probably be washing that out pretty soon. Let's get a little bit of orange over here. Again, you want to keep your colors over here a little bit pure. You want to keep them pure, so you got to wash out your brush in between, scooping them out and put them in the middle. And now let's just go ahead and mix this just on the palette with my cotton ball. So this is another option of something that we could try painting with, and let's just see what happens with this. Now, I think there's a little too much paint on there, so let's take a little bit off, and then, I don't know, look at that texture. Isn't that interesting? That's a little bit different, isn't it, from the sponge? Cool. Kind of reminds me almost of like the surface of the sun or something, like if you look at the NASA photos up close of what the sun does. And then it dries out, so you'll get a different kind of effect when the paint is wetter and the paint is drier, but yeah, I'm kind of just having fun with that. I'm going to go over this section too, just to harmonize it a little bit better so they don't look quite so separate. And as I pull up some of the paint, that pattern of the that pattern from the ribbon is coming back through again, and some of the cotton is coming off. That's cool. That's fine. Maybe when it's dry, we can pull some of that off. We don't want that to stay there forever. And just don't make a mess. Again, have a paper towel where you can dispose of or put these things while you're moving from one supply to another. So anything that has a texture to it, can be painted on. Ask permission. Just make sure that what you're using is okay to paint on. But even something like something like tin foil, for example. And let's go ahead and get a little bit of red on here, a little bit of yellow. And let's just put some paint on there. Now the aluminum foil is not absorbent, so the paint should stick on there. And again, you get some interesting textures, just kind of doing a stamping. So pretty much almost anything with a texture can be a stamp. So this painting's looking a little crazy. That's okay. This is going to be just part of our picture. So I'm going to use this abstract painting in something else as a background or a layer. So I'm just having fun, just playing around, and I can paint back over parts of it if I want to, fill in things, add a little bit more water, kind of get some desaturated paint on my brush, and I can even all that out too. I can paint over it, and you can still see a lot of those layers through there, can't you? That's pretty neat. So that was another thing that I could experiment with, and then again, because you're doing layers of paint, it's not just a one and done deal. It's definitely not. So let's add a little more red on here. We do have orange, so let's add a little orange there. Okay, and then last but not least, let's get a little more yellow. All right, so let's just mix all these guys together, get some nice variation. So a little bit of yellow orange, a little bit of red orange, a little bit of yellow red, etc., etc. Yellow red doesn't exist. That's just orange, right? And let's just go over some of this. So you can see that I can still cover that up. You can still see through it, especially when you add a lot of water, right? But yeah, it makes it more interesting that those textures are underneath this layer. So now this layer is a lot more interesting, this third layer, because I added all that texture and experiment underneath it. Now I can add more water and lighten it up. And if you work real quickly while you're adding the water, you can spread it out. But that's a limited time offer. It dries very, very fast. Let's go ahead and even that out, have that all the way to the bottom. So this is interesting. I don't know what's going on, but I'm having fun with it. I'm going to paint all the way to that edge. I don't like those little white flecks next to the tape, so I'm going to cover those up. Okay. I feel like that makes it sort of discontinuous. It makes it sort of, it's like a distraction. Okay. So we got some cool stuff going on here. Also, we might have some stencils out for you. So for example, like I was saying, I don't know what I'm doing, so let's do a question mark right here. I'm just having fun mixing these different paints. And let's go ahead and, even though we're doing warmer colors, let's venture over just a little bit to the purple zone. Let's grab a little bit of this purple from over here, and let's make a purple red. Just add a little bit of purple to the red so that we can have some contrast, so this will look a little bit different. And then I'll show you two different things. So this is what happens when you try to, and let's dry this brush off just a little bit. This is what happens when you try to paint over a stencil. Okay. A lot of times stenciling works better with a sponge. Okay, but we'll put that to the test real quickly. So here is me stenciling over this question mark with just a paint and a brush. Okay. You don't need to go over it too much. You just want to kind of fill in the area. And then let's pick that up very carefully. And you can see I got a bit of a sloppy question mark. So that tends to be what happens when you try to use a paintbrush on a stencil. Let's go ahead and put the stencil down one more time over here. So we don't want to cover up what we just painted, because then we'll get paint on the other side, which means every time we move this, we'll be moving paint also. There is probably a little bit of paint under there, again, because the paintbrush tends to put paint where you don't want it when you're trying to do a stencil. So let's grab one of these sponges. Let's pick up a little bit of this paint that's over here, actually a lot more than a little bit. And let's try and just sponge that color down. Let's see what happens when we try doing the sponge. Will it stay there a little bit better? I don't know. This sponge tends to disperse the paint a little bit more evenly, okay? But it might not fill in the shape as completely, but it often looks a lot cleaner. So let's pick this up and see what happens. Hey, that one came out looking a little bit more clean than this one. Not perfect, but a little bit cleaner. So let's get a, let's go ahead and take a little bit of this black over here and mix that in. Now we're running out of those warm colors, so I got to refill those pretty soon. Let's just go ahead and add some red and black in here, and wow, that's getting really, really dark. A little too much black we added there. So when we're adding this black to these, all these warm colors that were already mixed up, we're getting something like a very dark brown. And that's okay. That's more of a neutral color. So that's not gonna quite go perfectly with our color harmony of warm colors, but it's also not gonna be too distracting or anything. And let's try and go in here. Now, I already painted the question mark a couple times, and I have a feeling that there's probably a little bit of paint on the other side that's keeping it from looking as nice as we might want to. So let's try just this 0 over here. And let's try that one right next to the question mark. So I'm gonna hold that down, apply some paint with a sponge. We're not going to fill it in completely, okay? We just kind of want to get the impression of this number. Why are we adding a 0? I don't know, you tell me. It's just fun. Now that one came out looking really nice, right? So that was a good mixture of having not too much paint on our sponge and also having a clean stencil to work from, whereas this one was already a little bit sloppy from having done the brush, but I wanted to do that just so you could see what the difference, right? So this is what it looks like when you do it properly with a sponge. It should come out looking really nice and neat. And again, just watch out where you're putting these things. You don't want to put something with the paint on the table, otherwise you got to clean the table. And there we go. We've got several different layers of paint on here. I'm certainly not done. I'd love to use this sort of darker red in here as well. I can go back in with a sponge and kind of use up that paint. And you know what? I really don't want to put this paint palette away without using a lot of these colors that I've got. So I'm just going to kind of fill in some of these areas that I've been painting with some of these colors that I've got here. But I could keep working on this sort of endlessly, and it looks like, oh, look at this. I wasn't paying attention. Look at what happened. I got a little bit of the white on the sponge. Now there's like little white specks in there. Man, that looks interesting. Hey, whatever, happy accident. Let's keep it going. So let's just kind of spread those out, and maybe then people will think we did it on purpose. Those kind of white specks in there. It's kind of looking like a fire, like ash, you know, like the white that just ended up in there accidentally with these dark spots. Kind of looking like ash from a fire, from a very big fire maybe. But anyway, so I'm going to let this dry. I would keep it on the board so that as it's drying, it dries a little bit flat. Again, it's not going to stay perfectly flat. If you look at this, it's going to already seem like it's getting a little bit wavy. But now what I have to do is I have to do a really good job cleaning out all these brushes. I have to rinse out this water bucket. I got to put away all these things. Now, some of these things I'm not just going to throw away. I want to put them somewhere where they'll dry, because we're certainly not going to throw away a stencil. Something like a little bit of yarn, some cotton, some spaghetti, we can throw those things away. Ribbon like this, we don't necessarily want to throw this away. We want to put it in the place for paint textures, paint stamps and things like that. Maybe even the tin foil we want to keep, because we could paint over that when it's dry. Paper towel goes in the trash, tape goes in the trash. And then later on, what you're going to do is, after you've cleaned up all your paints, thrown away your paper towels that are used, and put this back on the paint shelf so that the paint palette can dry. I do have some paint left on this, and since I kept my palette pretty neat, I think I'm going to cover this with plastic saran wrap, plastic wrap, so I can use that paint again another day. But let me just show you again, at the end, when you've done all your layers, so I'm not done with this by any means. I got to do more layers, but I can put more tape on it. You're going to pull the tape off at a 90-degree angle. So if the tape goes this way, you're going to pull this direction. And look at that beautiful white border that's going to be left. And look, didn't take any of the paper with it, because I did a good job de-stickying, removing some of the adhesive by taping it onto my pants before I put it on here. And look at that lovely little border. But again, this was just one layer with a mask on it, a tape mask. So this is far from done, I think. It's looking pretty cool. It could be a good background for another picture or part of another picture. But I think I still have some more work to do. But this is ultimately what you're trying to go for your result, all right? So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.